Hi there, this is Jessica at New Mexico Wildlife Center. I am the education team leader here. And in case you missed our announcement last week, we have decided to start producing an educational video series that highlights different topics surrounding wildlife that you can find in your own backyard or around northern New Mexico. This week, we decided everyone's probably getting a little bit bored at home, maybe watched The Office a little too many times. And so we want to talk about how you can start wildlife watching in your own backyard and how you can facilitate wildlife into your own backyard. This not only benefits your mental health and your boredom, but it's also really important since a huge cause of population decline is habitat loss due to urban and residential development. So by modifying your own backyard to facilitate wildlife, you could be benefiting them as well as your own sanity. So the first place I really want to start is birds. I am a huge bird person. I love birds, and they also are some of the easiest wildlife to attract to your own backyard. There's also a ton of resources online, bird guides, everything that you can use in order to identify species, and also how to modify your own backyard, what seeds to use in bird feeders in order to attract species. So they're a great place to start in terms of wildlife watching. So obviously the thing that everyone knows about attracting birds to the backyard is bird feeders. But there are a lot of different variety in different types of bird feeders. So classic bird feeders are the ones that have seeds in them. So one like this one. So this is a classic one. There's some tiny little seeds in this called thistle seeds. They're very, very tiny, and they attract really tiny little birds. So you'll get finches, you'll get some goldfinches, sparrows, lots of little type of birds with this one. That's one of my favorites, just because those birds are all over the place, and it's just a matter of getting them to your backyard. Another really common one is these bigger feeders for sunflower seed. And sunflower seed is great because so many different species love sunflower seeds. You'll get tiny little birds such as dark-eyed juncos, all the way up to scrub jays, maybe a few nuthatches, tons of different. Basically, if they're a seed-eating bird, you will get them with the sunflower. Some people don't like the mess that the shells will create from the sunflower, but they do actually make sunflower pieces that are already shelled and cut up, and so those are useful as well. There are some other useful things as well. This is a nice easy one. It's basically seed already pre-filled in kind of a stocking, and so this will get some finches and sparrows as well. And suet. Suet is a really high fat feed that you can put out, and you will attract a lot of some really cool birds like woodpeckers and flickers with this. And it's really easy, doesn't create as much of a mess. You can place it on kind of a platform for them as well. If you're looking to attract some really colorful birds like orioles or tanagers, something that's really fun to do is to take an orange, chop it in half, and place it out on a platform feeder, and you can actually you can see the orioles come and get into all that juice and nectar from the oranges. So that's a great one as well. Dried mealworms are another little snack you can place out in your feeders. Those will get some of the insectivorous birds like bluebirds. You can also mix in some nuts with your feed. So here is some peanuts that we have mixed in with some sunflowers. So that's good for attracting some other good species as well. So those are kind of the really common seeds. Of course, there's a lot more that you can use. It's important with all feeders to clean them as well. I forgot to mention that. With the seed feeders, with the platform feeders, it's important to clean that every time you refill it, because there are some diseases that can be transmitted between birds. It's also important that you collect, you kind of rake up the seeds that are underneath the feeders in order to prevent that bacterial, the disease transmission as well. I do want to touch on hummingbird feeders for a second. They're great. They're really cool to attract hummingbirds. Everyone loves hummingbirds. It's really important that you maintain those though. Our hospital staff did a great post on our Facebook page recently about the importance of cleaning hummingbird feeders. So basically, once a week, you should really be cleaning that feeder to ensure that you're not facilitating any bacterial growth or disease transmission between hummingbirds. It's also important that you're making the correct solution in it for the hummingbirds. So it's going to be 1 cup or 1 part refined white sugar to 4 parts water. And it's important that that water has been heated up to the point that the sugar dissolves completely. So bird feeders, really common thing that people like to use. Another one are bird baths. So these are great for providing water and a place to cool birds down during the summer, the hot, dry summer months. Just like with the feeder, it's really important that you clean that between refilling. There's a lot of diseases that can be transmitted through those bird baths, so be sure you're cleaning that out. Something that's really important to note about when you're promoting wildlife in your own backyard is your domestic pets. So it's really important that you keep your cats inside. That is a huge cause for population declines in birds and reptiles and insects due to hunting. And so it's really important that those cats are kept inside. If you have a dog and you want to promote wildlife in your backyard, it's important to take some considerations. So one being your bird feeders should be placed at a higher level than some bird feeders. I have a stand in my backyard that is probably about 6 feet high, and I have a dog and she cannot reach that height. So now that I've told you some of the ways to facilitate wildlife in your backyard, I'm going to touch on some pointers for anyone who is new to wildlife watching. In terms of bird watching in your backyard, if you can place your feeders, bird baths, or plants closer to windows, that could be useful for identifying and seeing them clearly, but it could also cause more window collisions with birds, and that's a huge problem that we see. One way of fixing that is you can get tape that you put on the windows in order for the birds to see clearly that that is a window and not a portal to a different area. So that's one way. Another very simple way is putting those feeders and bird baths away from the windows and getting yourself a pair of binoculars. They don't have to be fancy binoculars, especially if you're just looking in your backyard, but binoculars are really useful at getting really close details from the birds so that you can identify them correctly. A lot of birds look very similar, so being able to see them clearly and see how different they are important. In terms of guides, my favorite bird guide that I have used is the National Geographic Field Guide to the Birds of North America. This is a really nice beginner bird guide. There's great pictures in it of the species, and so it's a really nice guide for beginning birders, and it will encompass everything that you'll see in your backyard. There are also bird guides specific to North America or to New Mexico that you could find, but this one is definitely one of my favorites. Lastly, I want to touch on if you're going to be welcoming wildlife into your backyard, be sure to respect their space and do not try to catch or handle them. Just observe them from a safe distance away. Unless they're sick or injured, in which case you should call either New Mexico Wildlife Center or your local wildlife center to get advice on how to properly capture and handle the wildlife for transportation to a wildlife center. Thank you so much for watching our first educational series video. Next week, we're going to continue on this topic and focus on birds that are going to be nesting in your backyards right about now. And we're actually going to be going around and showing you all the different species that are nesting at New Mexico Wildlife Center right now. We have a ton of different species. I'm looking at a curve-billed thrasher who is nesting in our ceiling over there. And so we're going to show you some of those. We're going to talk about how you can effectively prevent disturbing them while they're nesting and how to identify different nests. So thank you so much, and we will see you soon.